Next topic on our agenda is sustainable real estate tech, how innovation unlocks profits and helps meet net zero goals. Let us welcome our guests, Niklas Grunewald, Managing Partner at Redstone Built World, Agata Bendik, Program Manager at Plug and Play Tech Center. We also have Colleen Schutte, External Venturing at Nova by Saint-Gobain. We have Franka Birke, CEO and co-founder at Metr, and panel discussion moderator Damian, Managing Director at ING Media. Let's welcome them with applause, please.
Thank you and good morning. It's still morning, isn't it? Yeah, good morning, everyone. Great to be here today and thank you all for joining us. So the only topic we've got to nail in the next 45 minutes is how can innovation unlock profits and help meet net zero goals, which is really everything we're talking about this week. But it's a big topic, isn't it? And it's a hot topic as well. Everyone, all of the businesses that we work with across Europe, developers, investors, architects, and cities as well, and all that advise them are wrestling with answers to this very, very important topic. And I hope over the next 45 minutes we'll come closer to having some answers. So you've been introduced to our panel. We have an accelerator, we have VCs here, and we have platform representatives as well. So hopefully the full gamut of those with an interest here and an ability to solve some of these thorny issues. So if I could start with you, Agata, as you've made the mistake of sitting next to me. So I'll start with you. And I'd like to ask each of our panelists, starting with you, Agata, how you're innovating, how each of you is innovating, both as a business and with your partners to help achieve net zero goals while staying profitable.
Right. Well, good morning, everyone, and dzień dobry. Maybe I will start with just a quick intro to what we do, because Plug and Play Tech Center is a business of 800 people, 55 locations globally, but we still sort of new and emerging, especially in the CEE area in the UK, where I'm personally based. So we do all of the things that you mentioned, actually. So we are an investor. We invest in early stage ventures in B2B SaaS. So if you're interested, please do hit me after the call. Solamente, I think. I don't know if you're still here. Yeah, hello. No worries. So Solamente, of course, is one of our beautiful stars, but we also have, a massive portfolio of investments, especially in the sustainability area. The other part of what we're doing is the corporate partnerships. So we partnered with over 500 of those across the globe, some of them in mobility, some of them in semiconductors. Any industry really is industry and vertical agnostic, and then we run accelerator programs, those very, very traditional style. So how we innovate is really an important question, because what we're trying to do is really help our corporate partners stay ahead of the curve. It's easy to say, difficult to do. So we divided it into 3 horizons, Horizon 1, 2, and 3. So Horizon 1 is what we're doing right now, meeting, talking, discussing, maybe doing some optimization work. We call it innovation. It really is not what we're trying to do. We're looking at 10 years plus in terms of optimizing the operations, also building new businesses, venture, CVC, venture capital, and we're really trying to see what can we invest into right now with our partners, can we introduce to them right now that will be profitable, that will be cost saving, that will be really disruptive in 5 to 10 years.
And you very gently corrected me, I think, in some ways. Many of our panelists are doing all of the things I listed. But you use the word optimizing rather than innovating. Do you think is innovating an overused, maybe unhelpful word sometimes?
Yes and no. I mean, if you think about calling, an AI chat box innovating, it is innovative. But is it Horizon 3 innovative? Is it disruptive? I mean, personally, I think that, this is good to implement right now, But in order to stay relevant in the market in the next 10 years, I mean, 50% of Fortune 500 companies are going to be out of business in the next, 20, 50 years. So they need to start thinking right now about what are they going to be doing in 20 years. And it probably will not be what they're doing right now.
Great, thank you. Colleen, plenty of nodding there. Can you give us a sense of what you're doing at Nova as well?
Yes, so it's very interesting because now I'm going to give the perspective of a corporate. So I'm part of the venture capital of Saint-Gobain, which is called Nova. And Saint-Gobain, for the most part, is a manufacturer of construction materials. And so I would say our biggest challenge and goal with regards to sustainability is reducing the embodied carbon of the materials we produce. When you look at the carbon footprint of the existing built environments, a substantial part of it comes down to the embodied carbon of the materials themselves. So that's our #1 challenge. And for a bit of free promo, we have achieved some nice milestones in the past few years. We've launched the first low carbon glass line with 42% reduced embodied carbon. Around the same time, we did the first successful pilot for 100% net zero glass production, which was made out of recycled glass and with renewable energy, which is quite amazing when you look at the temperature at which these furnaces need to be brought up to melt the glass. And then our most recent milestone was last year, this year actually, in April in Norway, we had the first production line for net zero plasterboards launched. So our R&D is definitely working towards these goals, but as you've mentioned, I think in the VC structure that we have, our goal is to look outside and see what's happening outside, because we know that our future lies also with partnering as early as we can with those startups who are, bringing more disruptive innovation. And so, yeah, we're definitely looking to partner as soon as we can and figure out a way to work together.
Okay, and the profitability word as well.
Absolutely.
Can these two things can innovation, optimization as well, and profitability be pursued at the same time?
I mean, yes, I'm not a believer at sustainability at all costs. I definitely think that we need to make sustainability profitable and make those two work together. And I think it's actually very possible. And when we look at our clients on the market, most of them are not ready to pay the green premium. So we have to make it profitable. So we have to come up with solutions that are both sustainable and profitable, or that makes sense financially for us as well.
Okay, I'd like to come back to green premium, brown discount, and perhaps ESG backlash as well would be interesting to talk about. But before we get there, Niklas, Redstone built world.
Yeah, sure. Maybe just to say that first, we're not really innovating, right? It's mostly the founders that do that. What we do as a typical venture capital fund is really just provide the backbone, so the financials and the network. I think that's the two main components that we can add. We as a company, we've been in the market for over 10 years. We are building vertical focused funds. So whenever we see a vertical where there's a lot of exciting tech companies, a lot of innovation happening, but then also where we see incumbent structures on the incumbent market breaking up. So I like that notion of a lot of Fortune 500 companies going bust in a certain period of time. Whenever we see that, we then put out a fund for that specific situation. And that's what we've also done for what we call the built environment. I think it's a well-coined term. So everything around construction, real estate, infrastructure, and energy. In that matter, we've invested into a couple of really good companies so far. We've been first Czech investor in PlanRadar. We've invested in Tangible Materials doing embodied carbon reporting in the US. Sun Hero, one of the competitors of Metr, just to say that. But also DREM distributing heat pumps in the Nordics. So I think all of these companies pay into driving the world and the built environment to net zero. Our job is really just providing them with capital and also helping them scale at the early stages, because what we've seen so far in the market, yes, consumer-driven models usually tend to scale a little bit faster, but it's just really tough to sell to asset owners, and that's also one component that we can bring, right? So we are there to make the first important 50 warm intros for the founders.
Okay, it sounds like you're playing down your role there a little bit, but you're giving them the capital to scale and to succeed. And I wonder whether are you looking for the big idea? Are you looking for breakthrough innovation, or are you looking for those who can push the envelope incrementally?
I would say we are first of all looking for breakthrough returns. And just to relate that back to the topic, I think it's really important that sort of sustainability and commercial viability go hand in hand, right? Because at least the sustainability part doesn't work without the other. In terms of what we fund, we are not sort of focused on that is breakthrough innovation and we only do that, or that is sort of incremental innovation but might still be a well scalable business model. In the end, for us, what's really important is that the business is commercially successful in the short run, long run, and that's sort of how we drive our portfolio. Just to say that and to give a little bit of insight into how we work and also how venture capital portfolio construction works, right? So as when we raise a fund, obviously there's a fee structure. We pay out a management fee in order to pay the team to make the investments. And in order for the whole thing to work, we really need 1, 2, 3 companies, maybe more, that's even better, but at least to have these 2, 3 companies in the portfolio to make 10x return on the investment we made. So that's kind of how we think about our investments and what also drives our decisions. Yep.
Okay, thank you. And Franka, Metr.
Yeah, so I'm representing the venture side here. So we're developing the solutions, finding product market fit, and presenting this then to colleagues like here we have on stage and asking for their financial backup. We are a prop tech startup. We are based in Berlin, founded 7 years ago, 35 people meanwhile. We focus on existing or aging buildings with a poor energy balance. And our customers are large property owners, for example, large housing companies, or also from the commercial sector. They all manage a portfolio of several hundred buildings also, like also multi-tenant buildings, for example. And we enable them to increase the energy efficiency of their aging buildings and reduce the CO2 emissions by offering data analytics. And we do that in 2 ways. First of all, we make the energy consumption transparent on the building level, also CO2 footprint on the building level by showing them what is the electricity consumption, heat, gas, water. And then the other thing is we also make the operating data of the heating systems transparent. And we all know that buildings account for about 1/3 of CO2 emissions, and approximately 70% or even more come from the operational side, or come from, indeed from the operational side of the building. And what does it mean? We all like it cozy and warm. We want to have a hot shower, not a cold one. So there's a lot of energy used for heating up the buildings, especially in these times now, autumn, winter time. And therefore we see a big potential to reach net zero goals by focusing on existing buildings, by focusing on heating systems. We can monitor 100% of all heating systems installed in the buildings. So we have worked for quite some years now and built a huge library on different technologies that we can read out. We have developed a software that optimizes the heating systems in the building automatically by using weather forecasting data. And with this solution, we can save up to 20% of energy. But this is only one solution. We offer a platform. You mentioned that in the beginning. We have now 5 solutions. And a customer who decides to take all of our solutions can save up to 48% of energy and up to 50% of operational costs. So that's the profit side behind it. Before I started Metr, I built up one of the first climate accelerators in Germany called Climate Kick. And this is what I learned when I coached and supported the startups at that time. It's always important not only to have this environmental impact, but also a business plan behind it, business case behind it.
And if you were sat up here and the rest of our panel were down there quizzing you about the business and wondering whether to back the business, I just wonder with Metr and your previous business, whether the nature of the questions has changed. Has the emphasis changed? Has it switched in any way?
I can talk now for the industry I'm working in, for the real estate industry. This definitely has changed. Since the war in Ukraine, since energy became more expensive, and also, of course, due to the regulations we have in the European Union, which are translated into national law. So this is actually the biggest driver for our customers to do something. They wouldn't, it's not a secret, they wouldn't care about the energy balance of their building and the CO2 emissions if they were not forced by law to do something. So, and then it's their strategic decision to meet these laws, yeah? And if they do, they can maintain the value of their buildings, they can attract better tenants, I would say, but they can also attract better conditions on the capital market. So it's a big driver to do something for them, but it's not because they want to, it's like an intrinsic motive of doing something.
It's regulation and profitability. They're the headline considerations, wasn't it always? So, Colleen, barriers in terms of furthering net zero adoption. It's quite simple by Franka's measure there. It's regulation needs to will tighten, and that will force more adoption. And the bottom line is still a consideration. Are there other factors as well?
I think when I think of barriers right now in terms of bringing the construction industry, which we work in, to a more sustainable future. I think when I look at the time to market it takes to get us new products on the market because of certification, etc., which are good for security reasons, etc., but that is definitely a big barrier. And it's also a barrier for startups that are creating those new materials, where definitely, they're trying to be profitable, but there is these few years that have to wait to get those certifications. So that's definitely something I think should be worked on. But the other thing that came to mind from the position of a big industrial corporate is that, and it's a topic we touched on with plug and play, etc., but we are more prone to incremental innovation because we have these existing thousands of production lines around the world, and we are more prone to retrofit those and try to make those existing assets sustainable rather than start from scratch. And so we're not going to cut the branch we're sitting on. And so that's why it's so important to have this outside perspective from startups, and that's why our VC exists, is kind of looking to startups that are more agile, that have less constraints and can start something from scratch, and who will probably bring up the most disruptive innovations that we are not going to bring internally. So I think that incremental aspect of big corporates is definitely something to take into account.
So you're going to sit there and think about how can we improve the sustainability credentials of plasterboard rather than conceive an alternative to plasterboard?
Yes, I think how are we going to make our existing, for example, glass production lines sustainable rather than thinking what would be a new way to build glass, what would be a new way to replace glass, etc. And maybe one thing I'd like to add is we're talking about sustainability and financial profit. I think as a manufacturer of building material, I think the main thing for us is sustainability and product performance. I think that's the thing that our clients, actually they would be able to pay more, they would be willing to pay more if it's a better performance. And sometimes it's, okay, so we're having hemp-based insulation panels, is the performance the same? And trying to bring those performance of sustainable products to the highest level possible is our biggest challenge as well.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, Niklas, do you see the innovation coming from startups and perhaps the optimization coming from bigger corporates?
No, for sure it's both. I just wanted to add one thing on your questions around the barriers, right? So, yes, the industry I think is ridden with long sales cycles. Everybody's sort of trying out products and piloting, and it really takes a long while. The other topic also is currently that the sort of the funding environment has changed significantly, right? So if you look and just that notion, Franka, from the largest chunk actually of CO2 emissions is coming from operating buildings, right? And I think the largest challenge is actually renovating the current building stack that we have. The problem now currently is if you look at the capital markets, that just the price of money has increased so much, right? So a lot of asset owners are sort of driven by regulation to renovate, but a lot of them can't actually do it, right? So a lot of people need, so a lot of people are illiquid, then they would need to sell assets in order to renovate the rest. But where to sell and where to sell at a fair price at the moment, right? So it's really a situation where the market is sort of stuck. It's completely illiquid. You can't sell assets, thereby you can't really renovate at the speed that it would need to be in order to achieve net zero. So it's kind of those two things that I think make a bit of a toxic mixture at the moment. But just wanted to add that. So coming back to your question, I think it's both, and a lot of times we see it go hand in hand. You know, the innovation coming from the corporates, the innovation coming from the startup side, and what we've seen over 10 years of building vertical funds now is. Back then, I remember people for our first fintech generation sitting on stage and saying, there will be no more banks in 10 years. Now, back then, I already thought it was a bit ludicrous and ridiculous to say that. Anyways.
Sorry, no more?
No more banks, right, for our fintech fund, right? And now it has evolved a lot. And I think whenever we build vertical funds, the corporates understand very well that these sort of, be it breakthrough or incremental innovation, is coming from the ecosystem, from the startup side, but also they know very well that the startups are a lot of times very lucky to be able to partner with them, provide them access to research facilities if it's early stage, or to customers if it's a bit later stage. So I feel like the two things have grown together over the past years, and I think it holds especially true for you know, everything around the built environment.
Okay, thank you. Franka.
Yes, I wanted to share some insights on the barriers again, because most of the people are actually not familiar with what does it mean to digitize existing buildings which don't have a building control system installed. Like most of the newer buildings or fancy office buildings, they have these BMS in the building and they have access to the data. But our multi-tenant buildings, and also here in Warsaw, a lot of them, I've seen them on the way to the venue. It's about, first of all, it's about the installed systems in the buildings. These are old, use a lot of energy, are diverse, they don't speak the same language, you can't really connect them. And they are poorly maintained. Yeah? Often our customers, they entered into long-term contracts with manufacturers that build proprietary technology. They're still in these contracts, but they use an old technology and they still need to use them for some years. And then we have this on the building side, but and this leads to the next challenge on the company side. They don't have transparency on the data. None of our customers had a clue about what kind of heating systems are installed in their basements. So our CTO usually says, we go to the basement, we unlock the door, we turn on the light, and it blinks red everywhere, in every corner. Yeah? So, and no one has a clue. It's a black box. And then there is a notebook, handwritten notes in it from the 70s, and that's it. So there's no data source, no single point of truth of all these data, and this is actually the biggest barriers on the way to climate neutral buildings, and also to digitize our existing buildings.
So digital retrofitting as a barrier. Yeah. That's an interesting phrase.
Well, no, the existing equipment in the building to retrofit this, and the not available and bad quality data our customers have at the moment about the installed systems.
Thank you. And Agata, same question to you. Are there other barriers that the rest of the panel haven't listed?
I mean, I think you mentioned the sort of human factor as a barrier, and we very often see that, and we see that in PropTech, we see that in the transition to net zero in all the industries. I think there is something in us humans that just clings to what we know and it clings onto what we are used to. Now, one of the barriers is obviously the speed to innovate and speed to adopt new processes, optimization, innovation. And that was sort of what I've been working on quite a lot with our partners in the UK, which is how can you convince an organization of 40, 70, 100,000 people to now do something differently, to now believe that the transition to net zero is going to include not only something inconvenient to them, but also them not utilizing the processes that they were used to. So I think that human factor, and obviously it takes time. So, we were talking about the ESG, it started around 5 years ago. Only now, this year, next year, we'll see the ESG, the exact steps that we're going to take in order to optimize and then transition to net zero. So it's taken time because it just takes time to really get used to the idea of now we need to do something different. Now we need to bring that speed of innovation in a different way. And we can't do it alone. That's also, the partnerships that you mentioned yourself. It takes time to build trust. It takes time to find who you want to work with in the industry. But no longer you can do it alone. And one of the things that Plug and Play, I believe, does very well is those clusters of innovations, pockets of innovations across the world. The UK, or one example, is the mobility. Now, mobility doesn't necessarily have to do much with the urban tech, but it actually does a lot because we need to be mobile in the cities. So that's why we brought partners from the universities. We brought partners from Transport for London. We brought partners from energy. Because someone needs, on the transition to net zero, decarbonization and electrification of cars, you need to bring that electricity from somewhere. At the moment, we are not ready. Honestly, I don't think we are moving in the speed of other countries like China, which is a fantastic example of what they did in terms of collaborating in order to bring the innovation in decarbonization and electrification to speed. They have their other problems, so maybe let's leave that. But I think just bringing everyone together, just like we do right here, just like we do at the conference, is that one step towards breaking the barrier of the human, human error, human nature.
It's changing the definition of real estate in the built environment, isn't it? Bringing in infrastructure. And do you think that's ESG and the decarbonisation drive that's caused that?
100%. I think, this is a perfect example of a startup that does exactly what needs to be done. No one else would do it. As you said, the real estate owners wouldn't care for decarbonization or CO2 emissions if it wasn't for the government. And also they wouldn't be able to deploy a technology that's able to do it in the efficient way because you care about profitability. You want to onboard new clients, so it has to be UX friendly, it has to look good, it has to be sexy, and then obviously it does good. So no one else would care apart from the startups. So that's why I think obviously corporations have a fantastic way of innovating already, and we can see that in the market. I still believe that the startups are really, the oxygen that drives that speed of innovation.
Okay, I'm going to bring up a topic that often makes me unpopular, which is the ESG backlash, which I think we've seen over the last 12 months in parts of the US capital markets, amongst some politicians, sadly in the UK as well as elsewhere. And I just wonder whether that has filtered down to the conversations that you're having and whether it makes it that bit harder to drive the transition. There was an extraordinary piece in the Financial Times this week from a professor of finance at New York University. It's well worth reading. I won't go through it all, but it's brilliantly written, even if you fundamentally disagree with the argument. The last paragraph was ESG is beyond redemption, a testimonial to the consequences of letting good intentions overwhelm good sense and allowing the selling imperative to define the drive, to define and drive mission, may it RIP. It's quite an extraordinary piece. We won't get into the rights and wrongs, perhaps, but I wonder whether that sort of discussion is filtering into the conversations that you have and whether it is having consequences. And sorry to ask one more extended question from that, whether it's a question of language and perhaps we need to change the language around it and whether you are already. Niklas, can I start with you?
So since we predominantly invest in Europe, where the discussion is a little bit different than in the US, it hasn't really touched us. Just to say on the whole topic, I'm not a big fan of, in general, subsidies because they tend to distort markets, right? So I don't know if you, for example, look at what happened in Poland last year. the heat pump market was sort of on a high, and then the government came in and subsidized gas boilers in order to get a couple of favors in for the election, right? That doesn't help. So in general, what we try to do when we invest is look beyond short-term subsidies and really focus on the core value proposition, and if that also holds true in an environment that is not subsidized. So that's sort of where we need to see the core value proposition work out. That said, overall, the push towards ESG is completely right, and there I see, that trend is so big, and it's basically in the long run a question of humanity's survival, right? So you can't really, I think, argue with that, and for us, that is sort of the regulatory barrier in which we work in, and the whole fund thesis is set up, right? So I completely understand when people complain about unclarity, speed of implementation. There are a lot of things to discuss within the actual execution of the whole topic, but when it comes to questioning the topic itself, that's for me just plain stupid to argue against it.
Good, nice and emphatic. Franka.
I can only agree, and maybe I can add ESG is here and it will stay, and it has not only the environmental factor in it, it's also about social component, and it's really interesting talking about residential or multi-tenant buildings or big housing companies that have to manage these buildings. They have to find a way to do it in a way that tenants feel secure, can afford the apartments, and more and more tenants look for the environmental part as well. So this is a driver too, but it will take a bit more time. And the other driver, I'm talking about subsidies. We not really taking these into account in our industry when we are calculating the business cases. We do this for every customer. For their buildings, and buildings are very heterogeneous, and have different conditions for every customer, but we take the time to go through that and ask for data, collect the data, even help them to collect the data, and then show them, so what's the difference now? And it's an investment, what you do, and it will pay off in the future, because also it's not only about saving energy, it's also about getting transparency about the operating data, and it helps them to find out about malfunctions, about things that are not really going well in their systems right away. They don't have to. It's not the tenant that tells them about it. When the tenants do that, it's already too late, and it will be very expensive to solve the problem. So this is what we also show them. So it's also about digitizing everything, to become, to making their buildings smart. And smart also means making them carbon neutral.
Thank you. Agata, I want to come back to you because I'm interested in the UK perspective, where governmentally we seem to have gone into reverse. But Colleen, in the different markets that you deal in and think about, do you have to have a nuanced argument when addressing a particular market compared to another? Is in one more of an emphasis on profitability, and in another more of an emphasis on sustainability?
Our fund is active in the US and Latin America. That's our US team. In Europe, we're covering mostly Europe, a bit of Israel, and a bit of Africa. And then we have an APAC team. And definitely the way we approach things are different. I think our mission as a group for Saint-Gobain is the same, and it's very much a push towards sustainability. But we definitely see that the regulations in Europe are a big push. And the US is starting to grow a bit more, trying to catch back up on Europe. But I would say the backlash on ESG, I think, is actually the reverse. I think it's more of a backlash against how potentially loose the definition of ESG was. And I think over the years we're becoming more and more stringent on what ESG has to be, and we want things to be more tangible, more transparent. We require a lot more. And I think this push from the market for more tangible advances and more transparency is definitely something that we feel. And I think one of the biggest innovations trends we're looking at in Europe right now is these platforms on construction products, environmental data that are gathering, public data and specific data to kind of get key metrics on each materials of carbon footprints and all the different environmental impacts to give people the ability to compare products really between each other in a tangible way. And I think we definitely feel the push for more transparency, etc. And I think that's definitely a good thing. And so I think we're going in the right direction, even if we might be, it's just a name, 10 years ago it was a different name, now we call it ESG. In 10 years it'll probably be another name, but I think we're still in the same direction.
Okay, thank you. And Agata, no need to just comment on the UK, but I am particularly interested in your comments on the UK.
Right. I completely agree on the government side, so we'll leave that behind. But I still think that the UK has understood the assignment when it comes to investing, the government of the UK, when it comes to investing in early stage breakthrough technologies. We're one of the biggest government investors in hydrogen in the world. We're one of the biggest investors when it comes to batteries in the world. And the UK understands that they need to, they sort of moved away from Europe. So they need to build in-house. They don't have the capacity, they don't have the knowledge. They have some of the best universities in the world. So obviously they have the workforce and education, but they don't have the know-how on how to build semiconductors, which are, by the way, going to drive the transition to net zero more than we expected to. So I agree on everything, everything that you say in general. It seems like, because I think that, in the noughties, we talked about green tech, then we moved to clean tech, then we moved to sustainability, now we're at ESG. It's going to be some, CSR has been somewhere on the way. I know it's just a component, but it will evolve. But what really is surprising to me is that it's easy to say that our ESG report says we're going to be net zero by 2050. But it's funny because probably very few people will be still alive, and the CEO of the big organizations definitely not going to be alive because he is, in his 60s usually. That's what CEOs usually do. They don't care. They don't care how they're going to get there. And so that's why from talking about ESG, we now need to talk about how we're going to do it. So knowing the data is one thing, it's super important, and it's taken a long time. Knowing how we're going to do that is really what I'm interested in, because just talking about what is not enough. We need to talk about what will be.
I think we're all doing the maths about how old we'll be in 2050. I think we're all hoping to still be here. I've got a couple more questions, but I just wanted to check whether anyone out there has a question before I...
Anyone in the room with a question? Please feel free to.
We'll carry on and assume we're answering everything that's in your mind. I'd like to hear from you quickly, actually, each of you, about an innovation that you're not pursuing yourselves, or you haven't got an interest in yourselves, that you think is going to have a major impact. It can be down to another business level, or it can be a little bit more thematic. And while we're going along the line, I'd also like to hear about a city or a country, but perhaps a city where you think the infrastructure and the ecosystem is getting it right. Franka, can I start with you?
2 questions in one.
I like to pile them in.
And then in 2 sentences. Sticking to existing buildings, there are a certain percentage of buildings that are in such a bad shape that they an urgent need of a refurbishment. And we have one company, also a PropTech company in Germany, it's called EcoWorks, and they have developed a modular hardware solution. And I'm really I'm really impressed by other startups that have hardware and they are successful on the market. So they have developed a solution, and they can plan and also implement a facade and roof elements in a really short amount of time to multi-tenant buildings, and they make them within weeks. They bring them on another energy efficiency level to A+. And this is what impressed me a lot. And then the city, you asked for the city. I think it's important talking about cities. It's not so much the single innovation. It's about the ecosystem behind it, the infrastructure. And I spent my spring holidays in Copenhagen, so I could experience that in person. And of course, I read a lot about Copenhagen after that, after my vacation. And I was impressed by that 98% of the buildings are connected to district heating. So Copenhagen has a really huge impact when negotiating with energy suppliers about non-fossil energy. They want to invest in wind energy, and already now a resident of Copenhagen emits half of the CO2 amount than an average Dane. And Copenhagen wants to become climate neutral in until 2025. So that, I think, that impressed me a lot, and I think they are on a very good way.
Great examples. Agata.
I lived in Copenhagen for so many years, and I can so agree that everyone who lives there sort of feels very proud of how green they are, and even lifestyle is just different, and you sort of are sucked into the green style of living. But Copenhagen would be my choice. I'll have to say London because I lived there. But I really like London because it's a massive city. It's something that you can't really comprehend as a human being when you arrive. But it's the connection to technology from different points of view is very good. And in terms of, I'm not sure about the building management systems, but I'm pretty sure that London is really good when it comes to that. I know that the transportation is really good. London is really buckling up when it comes to EV charging points, which is really important for the car owners. The ULEZ zones, very controversial, but I believe that they will ultimately bring down the pollution in the city. And I think that cities like Singapore, New York, Tokyo will follow the suit when it comes to investing not in just one technology, just like you mentioned, but multiple different technologies, especially when it's retrofitting, because retrofitting is always much more difficult than just building from new in terms of also bring the human barriers. When it comes to technology, I was thinking about that earlier because I wanted to plug in one of the startups, plug in one of the startups that we've invested into called Root Connect. And I think that they do a fantastic job in terms of computer vision and understanding the human or traffic of humans and cars and other modes of transportations around the city. Something, again, that we're not able to connect because there are multiple different data points across. So I really like that because they can gather all of this and through AI sort of optimize how we move around the cities, what transportation modes are we using, and really support, especially in bigger cities, or cities where it's not that easy to jump on a bike because of the traffic. So that's Root Connect with a K. So that's it.
Thank you. I'll forgive the plug. Colleen.
Yes, so for the city example, I'm not sure that I have enough knowledge to say that one city is being better than the other. I'm just going to take an example that goes back to it's easier to build from scratch than rather to retrofit the existing. And being a bit of patriot here, I'm going to take the example of Paris and the Olympic Games village that we're building right now. And I think it's been very nice to see that they are building these villages and structures that are only going to be necessary for a few weeks, with the intention and design in mind to repurpose them afterwards. So they are designed to be modular, to be easily constructible, and we already have in mind a plan for what they're going to be used for afterwards. And I think that's definitely where the future lies. Now we need to design things with the intention of making them easily deconstructible and easily repurposable afterwards. And that goes into the innovation that I think is going to be a great breakthrough in the market. And that's not going to come from us as a manufacturer, but that we're definitely waiting on seeing happening, because we're going to rely on that a lot, is the concept of urban mining and using the existing built environments as a resource of raw materials. I think there's a big need for technology that is able to analyze existing buildings, analyze the quantity of materials and the quality of materials and the type of materials used to know how we can use them in other constructions. You know, raw materials is a finite resource, and so this is definitely the biggest next move. And this is, I think, a big tech leap to take. I think then the service around the repurposing, whether it's a marketplace or a manufacturer take back, that will be a more easier move because we know how to do that pretty well. But that technology of digitalizing, and that it goes to your point on digital retrofitting, but digitalizing the existing built environments to know what resources we have at hand is going to be crucial.
Thank you. We're being loomed over, so Niklas, I might have to ask you just to name a city quickly and an innovation.
Okay, we still have time. All right. Let me skip the city question, just two answers on the second part. So I think embodied carbon, certainly alternative cement, concrete, breakthrough innovation. Operating carbon, 100% incremental, going into retrofitting at scale. And a lot of companies are building processes, software for that. It's just more complicated, but incremental takes time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to our panel, and apologies for overrunning.
We're being loomed over, Damian. What a metaphor. Dear speakers, thank you very much for a truly interesting, insightful discussion. Thank you, Damian. I will have to find you on LinkedIn to get that FT article you started with. It no doubt is very interesting. Again, wonderful discussion. Thank you. Have a good day.